What's up, guys? We're going to be talking about absolute value equations and inequalities. Today we're only going to be focusing on equations. I'm breaking this section up into two parts as well, just to keep you from being overwhelmed by it. So let's go ahead and jump in, but before we do that, this makes for a bad day. Ugh. That's what happens when you don't study for your tests and quizzes. They come up behind you like that and kaboom. All right, so let's go. Solving an absolute value equation. So hopefully you recall what these vertical bars mean. Remember, the vertical bars mean that the distance from zero, that is what an absolute value is. So the absolute value of -2 is 2. The absolute value of 2 is also 2. A common mistake that I see students make often is that they think that this means the opposite of. These bars do not mean the opposite of. These bars mean the distance from zero, which means that it's always a positive number. You cannot have a negative distance. So how does this work when solving equations? Well, you treat this kind of like a grouping symbol because that's in truth what it is. So what you need to do is isolate the absolute value. What's inside the absolute value first? So in order to do that on this particular problem, we'll subtract 2 from both sides. And now here you have to think, okay, what are two values, or what's the values I could put in for x that makes this 7? So when you have these absolute value equations, you're going to get in the habit of making one positive, and then you'll make one negative. All right, so absolute value equations typically have two solutions. More often than not, they have two solutions. There are specific instances when there's only one solution, but for this it's two. So I have x equals 7, x equals -7. Now think about it. If I put these values in here, if I put 7 in for here, I get absolute value of 7 plus 2. Well, the absolute value of 7 is 7, and 7 plus 2 is 9. Or if I make that -7, the absolute value of -7 is positive 7, and then positive 7 plus 2 is 9. So that's how those work. You're going to have, again, two solutions. All right, so make sure that you are getting both solutions on there for that. Here's one for you to try. Pause and take a moment and do that one on your own. All right, that's the answer I got, so hopefully you got the same thing. Let's keep going here. All right, so some equations, such as the absolute value of 2x minus 5 equals 13, have variable expressions within absolute value symbols. This means the equation can actually have two different solutions. That should be plural. So how on earth is this going to work? Whoops. All right, so just like we did before, you're going to have a positive solution. So I have 2x minus 5 equals 13. But if within this absolute value symbol I get a -13, because it's absolute value, it's going to turn it into a positive 13. So I need 2x minus 5 equals -13. There must be two solutions for these absolute value ones. So here I have two equations, and I just go through and solve these like you already know how to do. So 2x equals 18. Divide both sides by 2, and x equals 9. And then over here, I would do the same thing. So I get 2x equals -8. Divide by 2, and x equals -4, and I put a big fat or in the middle. So right there, this whole thing is my solution. And you should go through the check on these. I'm not for the sake of time, but we could do this with mental math. 2 times 9 is 18. 18 minus 5 is 13, so that one works. Up here, 2 times -4 is -8. -8 minus 5 is -13. The absolute value of -13 is positive 13. All right, so both of them check out. There are two solutions that will make that work. Here's one for you to try on your own, so pause the video and give that one a go. All right, so here is what I got. Hopefully you got the same thing. Check your work, find your mistakes. All right, so solving more of these, they could get very, very complicated. So what do you do when you have values that are outside of the absolute value sign? You have to still isolate what's inside this absolute value. So for this problem, I'm going to start peeling away. And if you remember, some of these things that we've done with the reverse of order of operations, that applies here. So let's go ahead and work through this one. So I'll subtract 12 from both sides. That would be the first thing I need to do. So I have 3 absolute value of 2z plus 9 equals -2. Now, I cannot distribute this, all right? Because this is absolute value, this 3 cannot be distributed here. That's a mistake that I see from time to time, so be very careful. But if you remember, we did that FAL where we are unpacking equations, kind of unbuilding them. You should be comfortable with being able to do that, all right? Undoing, multiplying this whole thing by 3. I could divide by 3 to get that alone. So then I come down here and I have, 2z plus 9 absolute value equals -2/3. And don't be afraid of that fraction. That's not a big deal. From here, I get, let's think about this for just a second. All right, this says the absolute value equals -2/3. That should make something pop up in your mind like, something is not right here. All right, so something is not right. Well, if you recall, the definition of absolute value means the distance from 0 on the number line. And as I stated before, the distance can only be a positive number. So if you get to this situation where you have an absolute value that equals a negative number, this is impossible. All right, so I could stop right here. I don't need to go any further. In fact, if I set this up as 2 things, then I'm coming up with false math. There's no such thing as an absolute value that's going to make that. And what you would find is you'd get your solutions, but then when you go back and plug it in the original, they would never work. And that's because this is a no solution situation. All right. You cannot have a negative absolute value. All right, so because that's a -2/3, I could stop right there. It's impossible. This is a no solution. All right, so here's one for you to try. Go ahead and try to figure that one out on your own. All right, so hopefully you got the same thing here. This comes out with a negative number, so that is a no solution as well. Just be mindful of that. Keep that in the back of your mind because that could sneak up on you and you're not paying attention. And that's it for today, so I will see you in class. We'll finish the second part of 3.7 the next night.